Hey guys, it's Fifth Lauren, also known as 944. Don't forget Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here for another one of my Patreon discussions. I've got two of my guys here with me. So as usual, I prefer it when you guys start with the topics and see where you go. I feel like if someone runs out of something, I'll contribute when I'll think something up and keep the conversation going. So, problem is I don't actually know what name you want to be called for this. So what was the name again? Something the Feeder, right?
Peter the Feeder.
Peter the Feeder? Mm-hmm. Right, there we go. So do you have a topic, since you've only done one of these, so maybe you have something else that's of interest that you want to start us off on?
So, yeah, I guess for me the biggest surprise of, in terms of CS esports scene, has been the rise of Fnatic.
Sure.
Because so in terms of results, they've done probably quite a bit better than I expected, and I think a lot of people, analysts, expected, given that it's not a new roster per se, it's just a remixture of players that had played together in the past and knew each other pretty well. So my question is more, why now, would you say?
That is an interesting question, because the problem is, actually, I personally find Fnatic probably the most confusing team in the scene. Like, for example, I mean, to be fair, whenever JW is at his best, a lot of the things he does doesn't make sense. But I would say, even on like a meta context, his form doesn't make any sense. Because, like, for example, something a lot of people might not know if they don't remember the history is that right in the prime of actually when Fnatic was winning most of their tournaments was when he actually had a fucking slump. It's when they used to literally make him stop up, and he had to like main his shotgun. He had to sit in that like cobble drop zone, and like they literally made this guy like the bitch, basically. But fair enough, they still won because they had such a mad team. So the idea he's had this little like, I think, like, basically after the major, he's had a little renaissance in terms of individual form. And it looks like he's just gone back in time 5 years. Like, he's back to, like, prime JW and some of the stuff he's doing. So I think that in itself, put it this way, whether it's, like, good Counter-Strike, I don't know. It's great to watch. It's entertaining as fuck.
Yeah, JW popping off against MIBR was very difficult for me to watch as an MIBR fan. He had like 25 kills after.
Oh, he's definitely the player that's easiest to hate if you're a fan of the other team, because it's like, how is this bullshit working? You just see it coming as well. You know, you see your favourite player like turning away from a corner as he's just coming round like, fucking hell. It's like watching a comedy movie or something. You just know what's going to happen next, don't you?
Yeah, and for me, almost the mystery regarding this team is also so Golden just almost not doing anything at Cloud9.
Sure.
Disappearing for like 6 months of the map and then coming back, and then...
I mean, there's even a detail to add to that, mate, that a lot of people don't know, because I know they didn't publicise this because they didn't want to, like, sort of cock him. But obviously, when he was in Cloud9, yeah, he had the injury and he didn't play that much. But, you know, he was there at the beginning and there at the end, basically. But what a lot of people don't know is, when he was there and Flusher was there as well, as far as I know, Flusher actually was the IGL or something ridiculous. Like, because basically, like, I was told, I think it was even in an interview, this was mentioned as well, I was told they essentially just played default Counter-Strike. They just played the basic runs, and then the idea was... Because this is actually how you can tell it wasn't a well-constructed squad. What that actually tells me, it reminds me of when Optic a few years back, after the NA lineup left, they made that weird European one with Alu and Freiburg and Mixwell and Magus. It was like a very weird mix. It was similar to that, like, where it's like, you know, all these players seem decent on paper, but if you ever looked at how they played and the way they played in the matches, they just played like people played for a paycheck. Like, right, this is just my job now, you know, try and do well. Like, my job's to go to this corner. And so they never really had any, like, teamwork in that respect. So I agree. When I saw that, like, I actually thought, because he had such disparate elements, that was like Golden's chance to prove himself. Like, if he was some genius IGL, I thought, right, that's where he's going to prove it, right? But now he's come back to Fnatic. I'm not even sure that they're doing any genius stuff, but fair play, it's working again. He's obviously, like, with those particular players, he must have some connection. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's a crazy one, Fnatic, that I find is very streaky. Like, they'll have a few months there where they're just playing out of their minds and then just disappear off radar, get kicked out of groups, go 0-3 in World. Major.
Major, yeah, sure.
And then I feel like that's been a pattern over the last couple of years since they dropped off from number one.
Sure.
I think the most striking case of that was when sort of got tier phase early 2018, and then Flusher goes crazy in the final, and then which I think was an IEM. It was an IEM, and then wins the whole tournament off basically not much sign to show that this was going to happen before the tournament.
No, absolutely not.
And just Fnatic. I think they wouldn't have been too happy with how the last couple of years have been since I guess 2015, the last time they were number one. But I think now and then there's sort of moments of genius, and I think we maybe don't want to be calling too soon, but I think they've been on a pretty quick rise recently, and I'm interested to see where this goes.
Well, one angle I would say, again, like trying to theory craft why they've done well and Titan, actually what you're just saying there, like why do they go, like how can they look godlike for like 2 months and then shit for 2 months later? Like it doesn't really make sense because it's not just player performance. You know, you can look sometimes the players the same stats and they just look way worse. Like I would say one factor is, one thing I learned from observing Swedish Counter-Strike for a long time is that for some reason, the number one thing, I often say this, but people think I'm exaggerating, it's real. The number one thing that matters to Swedish teams for some reason is like social atmosphere in the team, which is a very alien concept to certain other countries. Like, for example, in Denmark, you can actually be like a bit of an arsehole. You just have your job, and if you do your job, you fit in the team. You know, the numbers at the end add up. They're more kind of like a football team now, where it's like, you know, you can't pick your teammates based on the fact you like them. You know, the manager signs this guy, and then you hope you make it work, right? Yeah. What's weird in Swedish teams is the reason I can't even talk shit on it is because essentially, even though they're doing it from like personal feelings sort of outside the server, what you tend to find is when you do somehow have people that you just connect with and you have like, you know, it just makes sense and you get along very easily, it just comes a lot easier in the server. So essentially what they've found the shortcut to and the hack to is like how you get the best team play in the world. So when you have players, like obviously some of the Fnatic guys are pretty obvious examples of this because how many times they've been amazing. These guys like read each other's minds. Like it's ridiculous. Like I know that they're not doing strats. I know that they haven't prepared what they're just doing there. They just played with that guy for X amount of years, which I think also is another thing we're finding now, is the Astralis core played together for so long, this Fnatic 3 played together for so long. If you can stay at the top, I think this is basically what Virtus Pro showed, is you might not have the best players anymore, but think about the mad advantage you'll have if 3 of your players play together for 6 years, and then the other team are all really good, but they're just brand new players. They never played in a team together. Like, on certain aspects, you're just going to have a fundamental base they'll never be able to match. So I also think that explains why they get bad, though. Because, for example, they might have the right mix of players, but then a couple of them have a bad run of form, or the wrong one has the run of form. And let's face it, most of the Swedish teams aren't going like super deep on the tactical playbook. And to me, that's the real reason why a team like Astralis could not just dominate, but like seemingly never stop winning, is because if you have a sick playbook, you can win even when players are playing badly. That's probably the hardest thing to do in Counter-Strike, but if you do it, there's a reason why people call that team the best ever. What about this, Zen? Do you have a take on Fnatic? You've been watching a match, mate?
I mean, I'm equally surprised. I do think that, you know, they have the JDubs and Flusha were always, and Crims, you know, they're all-time greats now, so it's not very weird. I quite like Golden. I thought it was very unfair, like the way he left last time, so I'm quite happy that, you know, I don't know if it's his, let's say, fault that they're doing this well, but I quite like that. I'm still curious to see what's their ambition now, because usually, you know, in the past they were competing for the best in the world, and I know that's probably the ambition for the org, but at the moment it seems already they're above what they should be. So I'm curious to see would they try to get, you know, Nolofmeister or something crazy like that to try to go further, or they're just happy to be this high.
Actually, that's the sad thing, is that literally so many times over the last year or so, let's say year and a half, that rumour has surfaced behind the scenes, like, oh, Olofmeister might just go back to Fnatic. Basically, it's always he either retires or goes back and does another year in Fnatic. And the problem is, first of all, every time it would happen, it's like then FaZe would just out of nowhere win a tournament later, and it's like, nope, he's staying, he's back again, he's going to stay. So like that obviously cancelled it. And then the other angle was Fnatic got really bad, so I also think that's why he didn't want to go. Because unfortunately, this is one of those areas that also CS really changed. Back in 1.6, the top teams were also the teams that had all the money, because there was so few teams had money. And so if you were a Fnatic in 1.6, you just get whoever you want. Like, as soon as you look in the Swedish scene and one of your players goes down in level, you just have a look around and you go, right, well, he's the best person who's beaten us in, like, qualifier or something. Just get him on our team. And he'll always say yes. Whereas I'll give you an example of something that I'm sure fans of Fnatic do not even consider, which is Fnatic, the name is huge. Fnatic, the esports org, is nowhere near the biggest even in Europe. Forget the fucking world. Like, those clans like FaZe dwarf Fnatic. Yeah. So unfortunately, for someone like Olofmeister, unless he really knew that it was going to be the number one team, which is why it might be interesting in the future now when they're really good, I don't think he would leave FaZe Clan, because when you have the kind of salary that you can get in FaZe Clan, like, you basically, it's like those Virtus Pro players. I don't blame you that you wait for them to pry the fucking mouse out your cold, dead hands, because, like, remember, every month you hold on. Like, my joke used to be, when Pasha and Taz used to tweet, like, bad game, might retire. It's like, they never would, though, would they? Exactly, because I bet what happens is, it's like fucking the 26th of the month, and you're like, oh, I'm playing so badly, I should probably retire. Ooh, wait about a week, I get that paycheck again. You know what? What's a week? I can do a week, and then once you get that week done, hey, you know what? I'm feeling all right. Yeah, let's see what the next turn. Yeah, let's do it again. Rack them up again, dealer. Let's do it again. Like, I get it, but unfortunately, that does, like, first of all, ruins the competitive aspect of the game, because people are just staying somewhere for money. Yeah. And then the second angle is sometimes the team that is better, because it's a weaker org, basically, can't always get the players they want. So it's not like I'm hating on it, it's just the business world. But put it this way, it was just very streamlined in 1.6. Like, in 1.6, you could even tell which player was going to end up where. It was just obvious,
Yeah. I feel FaZe was one of the ones I wanted to bring up. So, I mean, they now have Nico and Coldzera and Olofmeister. Are they going to... I mean, this is a lot of money being spent. Are they happy with being, 5th to 10th? Or do you think they'll make moves now that they spend the money for Coldzera?
Well, the weird thing about FaZe is I know they have the rep that they're just a money bags team and they don't care and they're just going to waste all the money. But that was actually just as far as I know, because they, as an org, for people who don't know, one of the things that makes FaZe a very unique team, actually, is most of the big esports orgs lose money because most of their investment is the players and the esports side. Like, they're trying to be the best team. What FaZe basically does is they have a streaming empire of personalities that just makes them tons of money. And then on the side, they have esports teams. But the point is, they got the streaming angle and they nailed the marketing and branding so well that they basically, when they came into CS, it was player money to them. It was like Monopoly money, what the salary used to be back then, when, the salary back then was like 8,000 a month or something. It wasn't that much. Whereas now, obviously, it's like over double, sometimes triple that. So the bigger issue is, if you've noticed, the trend for FaZe, the org, is they don't want to be in any of the franchise leagues in the rest of esports. Like, they know that that's a money sink and that you're probably just going to lose money doing that. So as a result, it's not that I don't think they want to have the best team in CS. It's just that at the moment, when the salaries are mad inflated, and we're literally, as a little spoiler, about to go into another period of that when this other league comes along next year. Because what's going to happen is some of the NA orgs that don't have a team will essentially just buy into the game, which means you'll have a bidding war type scenario for some of the worst rosters, but the ones that are available. When that happens, the inflation is going to go even crazy. We're going to get to League of Legends numbers where, in League of Legends, there are people making $1 million in a year, like one player. So the downside of that is I don't really blame FaZe at the moment for kind of holding on to some of the players that I probably would have cut a while ago and just saying, I'll stick with what I have now. He's happy. I've got the same salary, but it's different than going and having to sign if you saw in the EG team, that was $3 million that cost just to get them. So that's a lot of money. I will say they absolutely spent a lot of money. I believe it was the highest buyout ever to get Coldzera. That is absolutely true behind the scenes, but that's also because he was just never going to go. It wasn't up to him, but Immortals was not going to let him go unless it was for the full price. So I think they just did that. I'm not joking. I really think just to keep Nico happy. I think that was just one of those moves where they just swallowed it for that. So I personally don't think that they will make tons of power moves after this, unless they shed the players, because I actually think that's why it was Coldzera and Brocky that came in. So it's a guy that cost who knows $1 million, and then a guy who cost $1. He's free essentially. So I think that's why they did it. The logic was, right, if you want Coldzera, you have to find someone else that costs nothing, and they did it. Fair play to them. Don't know how they did it, but it's not actually looking that bad all of a sudden.
But do you think they can go up then with just this roster?
I don't think they can win stuff with this team. This team to me looks like an even worse version of what EG is, where if everything hits, you look fucking sick. But if it doesn't, I don't think this team even has tactics. So, listen, I'd love to believe it was a movie and Coldzera and Nico just shoot everyone in the head, but unfortunately, Counter-Strike was never really like that. You have to still be a pretty coherent team and have a philosophy and have someone calling the strats. Like, people don't seem to realise, I always say this, I'm almost to blame myself for emphasising how sick the players in that like best FaZe clan were and how good they were at fragging, because I think it made people think that when I say Carrigan's not like a tactical leader, that means he's literally just doing the joke of like, go kill Nico. Like, he isn't doing that. What he's essentially doing is, it's like, the analogy here might not work for people, but it's almost like, so in the NFL, the quarterback traditionally is like Astralis, right? He has a playbook. He literally has it on his arm. It's under a little like thing on his arm that he keeps all the tactics. And what happens is normally his coach tells him through the headset, like, right, this is the play I'm going to call. And it's like having the old CS where, you know, the coach could in-game lead from outside and he didn't have to be a player. Mm-hmm. Now, there are certain players though, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, some of the more like legendary quarterbacks of the modern day, they were so good themselves tactically in NFL that they were just given the leeway that sometimes they could just call on the fly. That's like what Carrigan's doing. So the key thing is, if he keys into like the vibe of the game, like, right, we can abuse this matchup at the middle on Mirage, or you know what, if we do like the smoke strat on A, like a very basic set of smokes, but then someone quickly flanks to B, then that'll set that. Like, he's just doing like simple stuff like that. But the idea is, because he's got like the biggest punches in the game, if he just gets an opening, it's a knockout. You know, he's going to get you in that. So, but that in itself is a very, very hard way to call. Like, you have to be basically, it's like an anime character at that point in time. You're like fucking zoned into the game. You have to read every movement. So as a result as well, if you read the game completely wrong, you're going to look like an absolute idiot and the team's going to just fall apart. So the point is, FaZe doesn't even have someone like that. They've just got Nico shooting people and then saying whatever the fuck Nico says. And as far as I can tell, like, listen, I've met Nico, talked to him quite a lot. There's not a lot going up in that brain. He's another one of those people. Him, Shocks, fucking Heaton. What you realise is they are geniuses in the game because they're fucking not outside the game, I'll tell you that. So whatever they're able to do in the game, I don't know how, they just clue into the game somehow. But outside of the game, they're just normal guys, mate. They're just like, you could literally meet this guy at a bus stop. You wouldn't know he was any sort of a mind for CS.
Mm.
What do you think of FaZe?
I mean, I think it could be more up and down. I do think they could win a couple of tournaments. I mean, they won the Blast, obviously, doesn't matter that much. But I think they could, if they are inspired with just firepower, win a tournament here and there. But yeah, I don't think they can be consistently top 1, 2, 3 world rankings. And I think that's what they should try to be. So, yeah.
I think the novelty of just watching coldzera and Nico play together is still worth like the price of admission, as it were. You know, like, I'm still interested to see what happens there. Like for example, I'm going to be super interested when they go to the fucking major with this lineup.
Yeah.
And it's like real pressure, and you know, you're trying to make top 8. So I'd love to see that. What do you think, Peter?
I thought that this FaZe team was a hot mess in the last few months. It's probably the most inconsistent team I've ever seen in terms of results, in terms of goals, in terms of even in terms of players. I mean, you've got essentially like a player from each country, fine, but then you mix in coldzera, who historically had like a system that kind of worked in function of him to be the clutcher, and then he's being thrown into a team where everyone's a clutcher, essentially.
Sure.
Now, what I think of FaZe is dressing room being a problem. Now, we use dressing room as a term in, say, football to describe sort of egos getting in the way of the team and everyone shouting over each other. And now, I'm not saying it's necessarily the case, but you certainly have a lot of ego and a lot of balls in this team, especially considering that, so Nico, from what I hear, has always been quite vocal within every team that he's played in. So has coldzera. I imagine it's the case with all of Meister. Now, in-game, they may do whatever Nico says, but outside of the game, I don't want to be in that discussion.
Sure. Like, I will say, one of the things that, even when Rain and Olaf were playing bad in this team, like earlier this year and the end of last year, one thing I always gave them mad credit for is, though, like, those are literally the guys who've essentially, like, decided to sacrifice their ego in this team. Like, they understand, not only am I not going to be the best player, but Like, there's almost no point playing with Nico if he isn't going to be the best player. Like, you've got to basically give him everything, haven't you? Like, not least because, as you say, by the way, he has an enormous ego. But it's not even all entirely, like, unwarranted. Like, to be fair, a lot of players that are really good like him, like, to some degree, you need that ego, right? Otherwise, why would you really think that you could do some of the ridiculous shit that they do? Like, some of the angles they peek into, and, like you almost have to really think that, like, no one can stop me. I'm like Neo in the Matrix. The problem is, obviously, as you alluded to, if it ever bleeds out in any other part of the game, you can have massive problems. Like I've certainly heard some stories where, put it this way, him taking over from Carrigan in the middle of a major and just saying, like, you're fucking this up, so I'm just going to take control of this team now. That's not even that crazy an equal story. Like there's some other ones that are more ridiculous. Like, he's one of those, here's the gist of it. He's one of those guys where if he did something in the game that was like a fundamentally wrong move, this is a weird example because actually he's a pretty fundamentally sound player, but let's say he did some weird misstep, like some stupid flash that didn't make any sense, or he took some peek that, like, you know, bro, like you could tell he was watching that angle, he's going to shoot you, but then he got the kill. Good luck ever convincing him it was the wrong move. Like, he'll really believe, like, what are you talking about? I got killed. It's like, like that sounds mad because people would think that's like a matchmaking play. You know, you think like, you know, because the problem is, Astralis has warped everyone's mind. It makes everyone think that CS and esports is sports and that we all have coaches and that we're all listening to them and fucking doing all that stuff. Like, yeah, Astralis is, and a couple of other teams. Like, believe it or not, FaZe isn't. And in fact, I'll tell you a funny detail. I often reference this. North has tried to do all the same as Astralis has. Like, they're trying to make it disciplined. They're trying to kick a lot of the people they kicked out. You know, when they kicked out all those really good players, and everyone was like, why are they kicking Magisk and Conf? They had terrible attitudes, really bad attitudes. Like, they were like the mini Nico, except not even as good as Nico, and being like, trying to like not practice or be like disrespectful. So sadly, North thought, well, this is sports. We come from FC Copenhagen. I will not tolerate this atmosphere. And they kicked them. And what they had to learn, sadly, is the whole scene's too young, mate. Like, yeah, that guy might be really toxic to you, but he's a fucking brilliant player, and unfortunately you can't replace him at the moment. Like, there isn't another config coming through the door now. You're just going to get an okay player who's got a great attitude but can't shoot people in the head in the game. So, that's that whole aspect of, like, the locker room. It's definitely a factor. But what I would say is this. You'd be amazed at some of the teams that it's also a factor in that you just never could guess from the outside. Like, you know, in the game they're succeeding, or like the famous ones are you think they're friends. Like, I'll tie it into the Fnatic one. Because Olaf Meister and Crims came from the same team before Fnatic, that LGB team, and then they played together for so long, and they even did the whole swap between Godsent and Fnatic and all that, right? Because of all that, people thought, and the fact that in the game they even played CT spots together, people thought they were best friends. At events, like, you wouldn't even see them together at, like, the after party or something, or one would be there and then the other wouldn't be there at all. So as far as I can tell, that was just a working relationship. So behind the scenes, who knows? They might have had beef at times, they might not like the way the other one did it, but as long as it worked in the server, we just get to speculate, like, oh, they must be the best of friends, oh, they get along so well, you know. That's why that cliche is a cliche for a reason. Like, success is like the salve that soothes all wounds, you know. Because when you win the tournament, I mean, like, the analogy would be like this. In basketball, back before people started shooting loads of three-pointers, you were only supposed to shoot a three-pointer if you were open or you were a really high-percentage shooter. So when some, like, idiot player who shoots a low percentage would just take one really early at the clock when it didn't even make sense and basically just waste a possession of the game, the joke goes like this. When the coach even sees him setting up, he's got, oh, no, pass. And then when he's going to do the shot, he's like, no, oh, God, no. But then if it goes in, he has to go like, whatever, I guess I'll just take that, right? So that's like what winning's like. Some of these people, right until they win, are arguing and having beef and thinking like, fuck this guy, he lost the game. But then when they win the tournament, it's like, oh, bro, oh, yeah, I love you. Like, you know, you're my inspiration. Like, they just become like someone after 2 glasses of wine, basically, at a dinner party. What about, here's the thing. Zen isn't technical. Are you actually an MIBR fan? You always just say like a little bit, right?
I mean, I like teams that play organized, like Astralis and so on, and they, to a point, did it at some point.
Because let's talk about MIBR, actually, because I think they're an interesting team at the moment. Because I have to say, this will sound weird, because obviously idiots think I just flame MIBR for no reason. But actually, in the position they're in now, I feel really bad for them. Because when I watch them actually play, in the context of who their players are, I think they're actually getting quite a lot out of them. Like, they have a bunch of good games every now and then. They'll have a big series every now and then where they look pretty good. I think generally people fit all the roles. Like, I think even fucking Taco's playing pretty well now. Like, they've got a nice squad. The problem is, It just doesn't look anywhere close to like the teams of old that could win the championships, win a major, be dominant and stuff. So like it's one of those sad scenarios where it's like I don't really hate on the roster, but I also don't think they can do much. I feel like they're kind of just where they are is where they are. Where are you guys coming at it from?
I think they're on the rise. Definitely been playing better. Kenji's been playing pretty well, I thought, except for the odd game here or there. And so I think that was a pretty good move. The one that I'm still far from convinced, though, is Lucas. Too many games do I see him with bottom fragging when he's playing one of the star fragger role alongside Kenji and Fallen. So this is like if it keeps on going like this, where MIBR is not able to get top 4 or losing to the eventual winner of the tournament, which has happened a few times. I think Lucas might be the first one to get cut, especially given that he's on loan as opposed to being an integral part of the team. Who
would you want to go? Like, obviously, this is like ignoring contracts and all that shit. Like, which other Brazilian player would you like to replace him with? Who do you think would fit?
If Phelps hadn't been so poor in his second spell, I would have said him because he's a pretty good star player, and I think with the talent that he has and his aim, potentially he'd be able to be a good
sad thing about that is though, like, and listen, now that we've tried it twice, we all know this.
Exactly.
He is the ultimate like mirage in the desert, because every time he's not in MIBR, he looks like by far the best Brazilian player not in MIBR, and you think, right, just plug him in, let him get comfy or whatever, and then every time he joins, like, I think even he just fucking checks out or something. Like, something goes wrong, like there's some disconnect between him and MIBR. So like, I know what you mean, like that's an obvious one on paper, but again, I don't think they're going to try it 3 times, unfortunately.
No, if they hadn't done that second spell, I would have said probably try Phelps again. There's no Cold Zero anymore. Maybe he'll be able to slot into Cold Zero's role instead and use his talent, whatever. But the fact that he didn't play well last time, and on top of that, the sort of outside of the game factors that I've heard, which was he's a very quiet guy, doesn't say much, doesn't bring much to the table. I think it was Fallen who said that Lucas was much more active, much more extroverted, and it helped a lot of the atmosphere. I think there's more to just him in the game that means he wouldn't probably be a good fit. I would just say Kei Serato would slot in instead of Lucas. I would have liked that to happen, and I know that MIBR went after him.
They just can't get players at the moment, unfortunately. I can actually give you some insight, though. Like, I don't know that Fallen actually revealed this in his reflections with me. I don't think he did, but I've heard this from a number of players behind the scene. The weird thing is this, because when Phelps actually first came along in the international scene, in that Tempo Storm team and Immortals, etc., I would also see him at these tournaments, and the same thing was happening, right? He was super quiet in person. He would, like, unlike actually some of the other ones, he would never talk to you. If he's having a drink, he'll only talk in Portuguese to someone sat next to him quietly, And then what was weird was I noticed everyone used to always post on forums that he's toxic or something. And I would be like, the fuck? The guy never speaks. What are you talking about? But what I learned is, what they meant is, this is why you don't use stupid, vague terms like toxic. It doesn't mean anything. What his real problem, as far as I can tell, is he's a stubborn person. So even though he's quiet, the problem is, if you try, again, maybe it's a little bit of an equal example, if you try to tell him, like, we did that wrong, or it's not the right way, if he's doing well, he just doesn't want to hear it, basically. That's kind of what was, like, communicated to me. And so, unfortunately, that, especially in a team like MIBR, you better be playing really well if you want to do that. Because, like, in that team, at least with the lineups that he was in, like, Cold Zero gets everything the way Cold Zero wants. And if Fur's doing well, Fur gets shit the way he wants. And then Fallen's left over and maybe Fallen sacrifice a bit for you. But then if you act like a bit of a cunt to him, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he says, actually, we'll give this guy, like, because if you notice, right, one of the things I always thought was, like, next level genius that makes Fallen like a fucking comic book villain is this guy's never been blamed for cutting a player ever, because he doesn't just cut players. He does, like, the more advanced version of what Fnatic clumsily tried to do with Golden, where you basically, like, you set him up on the front lines to go forwards, and then when he does shit, you're like, got to cut him. So what they do is they just leave you like on a fucking island. They just go, you do what you're going to do, mate. We're going to do what we're going to do. And then when all the fans are just wrecking you, you think Fallen couldn't just come out and go, guys, like, give this guy a little bit more time. If he did that, he could quiet a lot of fans. When he doesn't want you in the team anymore, he just stays silent. And so when you're just taking all the abuse, your tackle in the past, your bolts after that, your Stewie 2K, they just leave you there like as a fucking human dartboard that all the fans are just throwing the darts in. Because unfortunately, the MIBR fans, if they can clue in on one person, they just vent all the hate on that guy. So he's just like, eventually, this guy's going to quit. Or when we cut him, they were all begging us to cut him anyway. It's actually some next level shit. Like, he must have I assume when Fallen was like a 9-year-old boy, he was just watching like every episode of Big Brother. He was like, I'm like figuring out all the hacks of like human social interaction. So this guy, what's funny is it sounds negative, but I actually think he's a baller. I think it's like, that's sly as fuck,
It's like mass public manipulation on a very emotional fan base.
He could really be a politician, I'm not exaggerating. Like, I've even said this joke before, it's real. I said it in the interview I did with Dead. This is true, right? Even when Fallen is talking absolute shit, even privately, if I've talked to him at like a bar or something, when he's actually talking to me in person, and this is one of the reasons why I think he sometimes comes off bad on Twitter, because people who are very charismatic take it for granted. Like, they don't understand where their charisma ends and just text is just text, If you talk to Fallen in person, mate, I start liking him. I start thinking everything he's saying sounds like it makes sense, He just wins you over. He just has like a magnetism in that sense. And so I can totally see why he's a brilliant captain when he's at his peak in that regard,
He has quite a lot of status in Brazil, I think. Whatever he says, people tend to agree. But on him, whether he's going to cut a player or not, I think he said for the time being that's going to be the squad, and I think there's always potential for that to keep playing. But I think they've definitely looked a lot more solid recently, and I'm content with them just as they are, but getting better.
Oh, I'll also mention one other detail that I forgot to mention before, which is everyone knows that thing where publicly Furia was like, grandstanding and saying we've got 5-year contracts that these players will not be leaving. Like, it's not even just a contract angle. I've just heard it's one of those teams where like this is one thing that I always hate in esports, which is like borderline predatory behavior, which is where if you're the first big org someone's been in, I know Fury isn't a big org, but the results that the players had were huge for those players. Mm-hmm. What you do is you just get into their fucking brain, basically, and you convince them, like, I made you. This only happened because of me. Or you even don't do it from a creepy way. The angle you usually take is more like this, like, we only made it together because we're friends, we're family. Family sticks together. We came to the top together. We're going to stay at the top together. Bro, imagine when we win that major with this team. You don't want to just go to MIBR and ride their coattails. What if we win the major? What if we're the new MIBR, bro? And the problem with that is, if you know the way that esports works in any team that runs it as a business, the second that player becomes shit, there's no family anymore. Like, I don't know what family you just get rid of the fucking kid when you don't like him anymore. Like, you know what, actually just send him back, like send him to the orphanage. Like, that doesn't exist. Like, that's why the whole angle is always a bit worrying to me, because as far as I can tell, it's going to be very, very hard for any of those players to leave this iteration of Furia. Like, I assume that team would have to get so bad they wanted to make money by selling the players, basically. And the problem is they're actually a pretty half-decent team at the moment. So I think, unfortunately, if he's going to get Brazilian players, it can't be Furia, unfortunately, which is a downside, because a whole bunch of those players seem like the obvious shoe-in. It's the player you'd want to pick. Like you said before, Keserato, it's pretty, you'd definitely give him a try, right?
I'd agree, but I think there's one small factor that could potentially allow for a swap, and this fact that Henny now plays on Furia and Lucas
right.
plays
You
on
think if
MIBR.
Lucas goes the other way in a trade, right?
So a straight-up trade was my idea for Keserato.
That's not a bad idea.
Of Lucas. But yeah, I mean, not going to get something like Taco for Henny and then get 3 AWPers on the same team. But yeah, getting, I think, Henny and Lucas, they've always been, at the very least, half decent players playing together. Lucas and Henny, and I just don't. I wouldn't personally put them on MIBR. Especially right now with KNG, I'd take KNG over Henny any day. But I think, getting another, just basically a cold zero replacement is what I'd want for that next level for MIBR, because KNG is it's like a simple-ish, as in the player simple.
Right, sure.
Introduction where you have Star AWPer alongside Fallen, who's like a mad AWPer, I would call.
JW-esque, you know.
But Fallen is just a mad genius with that weapon. Some of the things that I've seen him do, like jumping out of smoke, no scoping with a AWP and then getting back into the smoke, and it's just he's something else. He's like a very unique player, I think, with the AWP. Very aggressive and also very unpredictable. But yeah, at least that would be my idea. What do you think, Zen, in terms of?
I'm actually surprised you're happy. Well, not even say happy, but you're actually okay with being around this number. I mean, if they're 14 HLTV with Furia, but that for me is unacceptable. I mean, with the major in Brazil possibly coming up relatively soon, I think it's just a waste of not having. Are they? They're challengers, right? So okay, they're at least there for sure, but. I mean, they might not even go to the main stage. They might go out in the challenger stage. It's just, I think that would be terrible.
Well, in terms of expectations, I'm not hoping for this team to turn into mid 2017 SK again. But I'm comparing this full Brazilian roster right now with what I feel is a few strategic clicks away from a pretty well-functioning team full of a lot of good players, and then remembering how tragic 2018 was as a whole from a MIBR fan's perspective. And I would take this and the growth that MIBR has right now over just no idea what the hell is going on for about 15 months that we had from basically was it the Atlanta Major in January 2018?
No, Boston Major.
Boston. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not happy because I know that they've been far better in the past, but I'm at least not discontent with the direction in which it's going.
So what would be a good placement in the if they're top 5? Is that like, would you be very happy now?
I'd be pretty content with. I'd take top 5 right now, to be honest.
Sure.
Top 5 with, because I think, and historically that probably shows is the case. Top 5 teams can always challenge for a tournament title.
Yeah, my point is that compared to the past, compared to their ambitions, the org, the investment, it just seems that they're way too low and they'll want to do something. But yeah, at the moment it's hard.
I mean, one angle I will say that people haven't considered is the fact that they got an enormous buyout for coldzera. Listen, like, no one wants to just give that to someone else now, but it does mean that if someone asks for what previously was a pretty unreasonable thing, like, I want 200,000 for this player who's never played on a top level. That's not that bad, actually, when you've got $1 million and you can just put 800k away and then give the 200k. You know, that all of a sudden that becomes a viable move. So I think personally, in line with what you're saying, I think because they've had this roster not that long, actually. Remember, they only really formed it just before the major. And they obviously had to play the major with that whole scenario with coldzera, etc. I think basically they are just going to give this more of a chance. You know, it's very rare you're going to make a move after, like, 2.5 months, 3 months or something. That's not really enough time anyway. Even if a roster fails, you want to really know it failed. Like, the last thing you want to have is you start doing the deal behind the scenes and then all of a sudden the team does super well. It's like, what the fuck? I've just basically cut the guy. Like, basically what happened with Golden in Fnatic. Like, what people don't know is the real Golden in Fnatic story is they were trying to cut him before they had all the success. And the problem is they basically had the deal almost done. Like, right, Exist, you're going to join at this time when you can. Then we're just going to find a way to cut this guy. Right, cool. Shit, we just won 2 enormous tournaments and like $1.5 million. Fuck, how do we do this? And then what's hilarious is in that particular deal, they didn't even just stop it. They were like, it still has to happen somehow. So how do we kick this guy out even though he did just win us $1.5 million? Like, that's probably actually the craziest one ever. And then that's why I found it. Don't know if you saw this. That's why there was some beef on Twitter. Because then they tried to pretend now, this year, like they loved him all along and never wanted him to go. Like these absolute rats. That's what fucking Flusher and... There's the one problem with JW and Flusher. In the game, they're rats. But they're also rats in terms of like who they are as people because they're just little fucking nerdlings. Like, they think they can just tell a little lie and it's like IRC 15 years ago and if I talk shit, they can ban me. It's like, mate, I'm basically the operator on IRC now. I have more followers than you sometimes, so I'm in the game. This is not the old world. That's what you all don't know. Back in the day, if you were a journalist, people just silence you easily. You're just nobody, you know. You have to get access to these people. Now, they have to battle on the level of ideas, mate. You have to actually have a good point to win these battles, in theory. I mean, all the fans just tell me I lose anyway, you know. I mean, literally, JW could just reply to me, "No, you," and then everyone would be like, "Oh shit! Oh snap! Oh he owned you, homie." It's like, "Oh, can't come back from that. Can't come back." It's like, really? Did he own me though? Did he really own me?
Nice.
What's another team everyone's interested in? Oh, by the way, I can't remember from the last episode because we only did one with you. Do you follow any games other than CS?
Who, me?
Yeah.
League of Legends. But I sort of stopped for a few years during the sort of Korean, not even Korean, just SKT domination and started again.
Did he come back this year though?
Yes, I did. And I had quite a lot of fun watching Worlds. Also got myself back into playing the game. Now... what do
you think of it as a game? Are you actually a fan of playing the game?
In terms of playing the game, so I quite like the game in itself. Hate the community and how powerless you are as a casual to all the bullshit that goes on. Now, in CS, I like climbing both League and CS competitively, as in not professional competitive.
Yeah. Just trying to see how good you can be.
Getting your golden flats,
But I feel, someone disconnects, decides to troll, and we kick him. Sure, I'll take the bot or whatever. Like that's fine.
Yes.
But in League, you basically may as well disconnect yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what's always bugged me about this game. Even Heroes of the Storm, which I used to play quite a lot because I love that MOBA. And I know that's actually pretty rare from the scene. It wasn't particularly popular, but there was a lot of cool stuff that I think they did, and one of them was the bot playing when someone disconnects. And that bot may not be a genius, but if you ping on him, he's going to follow you. And if there's a team fight that comes, he's just going to use his ult randomly. But
that's cool.
That's still better than...
Yeah, of course. Than a guy in the spawn. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Now, there was a lot of memes in Ranked where the bot would just land like a 5-man ult out of nowhere.
Okay.
People would feel wrecked. But like it wasn't... Like it was a really bad bot, almost like the League of Legends level, but at least that would mitigate the effect of the bullshit that goes on, and that's why sort of League. Sometimes I hold it back, but then I just keep playing, thinking it also happened. I've taken wins where the enemy was AFK from like 3rd minute, and then they couldn't.
Sure, it evens out. I hope
So,
no, what's funny is I have a very similar experience, mate, because as an esports game, I'm a mad elitist. I think League of Legends is shit compared to CSGO or past versions of Counter-Strike and Quake and stuff. But actually, as a casual game, it's a pretty fun game. And the problem I have is, kind of in line with what you're saying, it's either really fun, because what I like about it is I like the way that all the roles are distinct, and in theory, this sounds weird, people always never understand this. I actually think low-level League of Legends players have a better understanding than low-level CSGO players. Like CSGO players, half of them look like they've never watched a pro game in their life. The League of Legends pros, because the roles themselves are built into the game, they have to understand basics. It's actually not that often you get a jungler who just doesn't understand any concept of jungling and just fucks it up. In Counter-Strike, you can have a guy who plays Beyond Mirage and just pushes middle every round. Like at that point, the game's ruined in a way that you can't recover. So, but I will say, like you said before, the problem is, it's like fun, and then it doesn't just gradually go into not good, it just snaps. And then, like you say, the worst feeling about League of Legends, I think this is where all the toxicity comes from. It doesn't come from the people, it comes from the game. What makes you toxic is when, forget AFK, because like at least that one you can sort of mentally deal with. It's when you just have a teammate who's fucking up all the time, and it looks half intentional. Like half of it's he's an idiot, but then the other half is, even if you tell them like, oh, don't do that, or you ping them away from a bush, like there's a fucking jungler in there, and they just run in and face check it anyway. When that happens a couple of times, you feel trapped. You feel like, right, well, so basically these guys are now holding the next 30 minutes of my life hostage. I can't win. And in fact, I'll give you a great example. It can even happen when you're winning. Like, the worst feeling ever is when they don't understand, like, the concept of any objective except team fighting. And so you do a team wipe, you've won the fight, and they don't even all push them in together and end the game. They start going back to the lanes, like, oh, cool, now I can get more items and farm the game. It's like, the point of the items is to end the game. Like, what the fuck? And so then you feel trapped, like, so there's 20 more minutes till end the game. And, like, these are the scenarios where that doesn't really exist in Counter-Strike. Because as you say, like, what's weird is, I agree with you, even when you have a bot, you can actually still think, fuck, well, as long as I do like a clever quick push now, I can take the bot, I can still play and I can have a gun. Like, it actually does add, like, it basically sort of like offsets how many bad games you'd have if just someone was 4 versus 5. Like, that would be totally unplayable, obviously.
Yeah. But I will say this. In Counter-Strike, I've had much shorter streaks of me really enjoying the rank and then trying to get to as high level as possible. I think like LEM was the best I got or something like that. But during those periods where I was really focused on playing Counter-Strike in comp, they tend to last much shorter than my League of Legends streaks. Now, a couple of reasons for that I can point to. And that goes back to the point that you said about game knowledge of Counter-Strike. It is quite a bit more difficult to pick up compared to League. So the big one for me is, if you're a terrorist and you're trying to become a better player in comp, you can't not study the game. You have to study smokes. You have to study which angles you throw your flashes. You have to understand, like if you're attacking A on Mirage, you like basic 1B, you have to molly the arrows to get the guy who's on the palace. Like people can't really guess those things very well unless they see esports, and even then in esports, you can't just look at what one player is doing. You can't see those strats happening.
I feel like most fans, when they're watching the actual live games, don't look at the strat anyway. Like, they don't really look who's mollying where. They just kind of wait for the kill, don't they? They look at the crosshair. Dying. Yeah, exactly. They just want to see the kills. So sadly, I think even when they watch, that's actually probably a good angle as to why. Whereas, to be fair, a League game builds up so slowly and is in such like incremental stages that you all recognise, like, oh, we're switching to this phase. And the commentator is almost telling you, like, right, and now they're going to do this. Because to be fair, the team fight's basically like a few of them end the game. So I actually think it's even logical that like the knowledge is a bit more compartmentalized in League, and as a result you get people who are in theory bad players. Like, I know when I first started playing, I was in bronze, like even players there, some of them understood basic concepts. Meanwhile, like, I know the matchmaking ranks don't line up. Well, put it this way, I've been to the absolute top in matchmaking, and this is not a joke. There are global elite players who like would never even be able to be in a team. Like they're the guy who just has really good aim but doesn't understand any of the concepts outside of like their own individual game. For example, like, they don't know how to play off you. They bait everyone. They just use an AWP every round. Whatever the fuck, you know. There's people at the top are like that. So as like if you go to Challenger, that guy's like semi-pro basically in League.
Yeah. I played a tournament in the UK a few years ago that university team had built, and we got to, it was something like semi-final, and then we ended up playing against a bunch of, I wouldn't say necessarily semi-pro, but there was a Cloud9 streamer called Fi. He's got a big YouTube channel. He was in that team, and like he had some like high diamond elo players, and it felt bad. Just like we had diamond players, relatively decent team, but like the difference between our team play and theirs was just something else. And but we could analyze this. we could see, okay, they put the wards there.
Sure.
They grouped up in mid after they managed to get a patch in the jungle. Okay, fine. But in Counter-Strike, if I built a team, I'd just be like, well, here's a strat. Let's try it and try and. It's very, very different in terms of how you would how you would improve in your own game and within the team play. And I think it's much harder for the casual in Counter-Strike to
put it this way.
Develop.
It's actually, in my opinion, the biggest flaw of CSGO that Valve hasn't even. They don't even think of what we're talking about, this paradigm we're describing here. Because put it this way, when I played Counter-Strike for 12 years before CSGO, I wasn't playing on public servers. That was maybe the first half a year. And then once I found teams and clans, as they were called back then, every game was an official or a scrim in a competitive environment with people who are in my team against another real team, or at worst, like a mixed team of people who at least know competitive play. And so the idea was, that's why I'm leveling up. That's why I'm testing myself. That's why I know. Well, the problem is, they've tried to make CS, probably because of the success of Dota and League of Legends, like it has a public mode that's a casual mode. And whereas, like we're saying, one of the interesting things about League is some of the fundamental concepts can work even with 5 people who've never played together who are just thrown into a game. Whereas in CS, there's no strat, and there's no real strat can work with 5 people who've never played together, who've never spoken, and obviously in Europe, even maybe come from totally different cultures and languages, everything. The biggest problem is, what they should have done is have that as like a public mode, and then I would have years ago integrated what people basically made. Like, I don't know if you ever saw, the people behind Na'Vi made that website. I know they always advertise through Starlight. They're called like dreamteam.gg or something, and it's a site basically where you can just like advertise, like, I need a player to join my team, or you can say like, I'm a player available, and then the idea is, I think it like shows you rank and stuff and past teams you're in, and it's a way to try and bridge the gap for what we used to have, which is because we used to all go, like, to even find a game back then, the public servers, obviously there was no matchmaking, you had to even join the server, so the kind of average player had a lot more nous in terms of knowing where to go to find the games. So it's kind of like recreating that. Like, the person who wants to play finds a team who wants to play with him. They give him a trial. He plays a game. Because the problem is, that's real Counter-Strike. Like, what you play in casual, it's fun. It's like, it vaguely looks like Counter-Strike. You can still shoot people the same way and stuff. But as you say, if you watch like a really good pro game and you think, what a fucking sick smoke that is, it's almost of no value. Because even if you do it in the game, your teammate doesn't know what you're doing, and he's not going to respond to it correctly, and he might just never use it. I agree. It's hard to know, like what am I working on today? Like, I can't only be working on my aim. Like, that gets boring pretty quick. What do you like about or dislike about Counter-Strike, Zen?
I only play League now, and I have carpal tunnel, so I play support League. That's the only role I can play because it's very easy.
Do you ever do any exercise or anything to try and help yourself?
Yeah, I did all the stretches and so on.
Do you think they help?
I just stopped. I stopped playing for a while, and I do breaks when I work every half an hour, and it has gone away, so that's cool. But I wouldn't play like ADC every game, right?
Fair enough.
Last hit everything. If I get the ADC, I play Jhin or something that everyone could play at the
Sure.
What I like about League, and that was my change in mentality. Before I was like, okay, I play Janna, let's play Janna forever. Now it's like, okay, they released Senna, the most OP shit ever, and they're not changing it. I'll just abuse Senna until it's no longer OP. And ever since doing that, and all these new heroes that have slows and dashes and so on, it just become way easier. So actually, I don't mind, even if a player leaves, it's like, I have Senna, I can carry this from support. So.
See, here's the thing. What you've done, essentially, inadvertently, is you've just become Riot's ideal customer. Because that's the whole reason that they released those champs busted as fuck for the first month and a half, and then they released the skins just before they nerf them all, exactly for the reason you're saying. Because what they do is, the gimmick to keep you playing is, like, obviously in CS, we don't get, like, a brand new gun or anything, do we? Like, we don't really get a lot of novelty. Well, even just the novelty of playing a new champ is fun. Like, you don't really mind even the first 2 games you lose, because you're like, I'm just figuring it out, no stress. Yeah. And then, obviously, like you say, they're nearly all released it mad busted, like ridiculously, as you said, it's not even like they're just overtuned like characters. They'll have like 2 extra sort of movement spells than all the old fucking champs. So what they're basically saying is, like, this is the joke of League. One area that Riot were geniuses, that they saw the future in a way no one else did, or at least I would suspect they just guessed and got lucky, is they've essentially managed to create a pay-to-win game that everyone thinks is free.
Yeah.
So what happens is people like me who are chomps. I mean, the stupid thing is I have enough money I can just buy all the champions, but mate, I come from the northeast of England. Like I can't just waste money. I'm sorry. It's programmed into my brain, you know. So I still think like I'm not bloody paying Mark Merrill, grind for more RP, and then I just get all the champions when they're shit, don't I? Like I got Pike when like it was fucking nerfed or whatever. Like I'd be watching all those sick pro games. Like this is gonna be amazing, and then I got it. It was like, well, it's nerfed, and now people ban it half the games because everyone knows what it can do. So I'm the opposite of you, mate. I'm having a nightmare. I'm trying to play like fucking like in season 6 hours. You know, I was trying to play like Vayne when it wasn't even like meta into Jin, and like, why am I getting my shit pushed in every laning phase? Meanwhile, I should have just done what you did when Jin came out. I should have just played that, got my first 10 free wins, then switch over to fucking, I don't know, Nidalee jungle or something. Get my few wins off that one. That's got some more item that's OP as fuck. Like, you're right. That probably is the most fun way to play.
I just go on OPGG or UGG, whatever, all those websites, see what says my win rate, and I just play that. It's just easy. I mean, Pike now has like 45% win rate.
Yeah, exactly.
It's terrible. It does give double gold on the ult, so you can still carry, but it's not.
No, there's the thing. I still play it just because it's such a fun champion to play. It reminds me of like Thresh. Like you can never nerf Thresh enough that I would never play it. Like it's just got so much utility, so many things you can do. The whole point is that's actually a good example of a champion that breaks up for some of the deficiencies of League. Because the problem with something like Janet is it's so on the rails that if you're losing the game, it's like, well, I can't like fucking play make. Can I? Like, what can I do? I've got an ultimate, that's it. Like, there's about 8 mates. So the difference is on Thresh, you can always believe, however naive, that like, I will be the hero. I will make the plays. Flash, flare. And then when you miss it, you're just like, well, I threw the whole game for everyone. Fuck my life. Like, exactly. Or Lee Sin, you know, same shit. Lee Sin can be like 30% win rate. You still play it because you think, you're just addicted to the dopamine rush of the time you play it and you get the 3 kills in a row at the beginning of the game. And you're like, I always secretly knew I was really good at League. Like, you're not really. You just got 3 kills for like...
But don't get me wrong. I actually think this is horrible for competitive. Like the fact that all these supports like Yuumi, Senna, Pike, they're completely busted in pro, even though they have like 40% win rate in solo queue. It's just terrible for the state of the game. But
don't you find it funny though that it was League fans who were so against the concept of going to the Dota 5 bans for so many years? And I was like, are you guys out your mind? We need more bans in League. I'd maybe even up the bans, like you'd make it more strategical, because actually at the moment, like you're saying, for the last year or so, there's a couple of things like Yuumi, you just have to permaban. They're so ridiculous. Like, that's not even strategy. It's not like I'm picking that against you. It's not like, there's the problem. My ideal version of League would be I'm banning Janna against Peter here because he's amazing on Janna. I'm not banning it because it's just so OP that any human being with hands will wreck me on it. Like, that's just, like, you've actually removed the strategical component when you do that. So there's an area where, I mean, this is just the eternal dilemma of League, isn't it? It's like, when you have a game that makes that much money from casual and is that successful from casual, like, I would obviously make the game super sick and be an elitist, but as a result, I'd have never had a massive successful game in the first place. So, like, the strategy they've taken clearly to make money is a brilliant move. It's just not very good for competitive, at least compared to the more hardcore games that were all, you know, the Dotas and the fucking CSGOs of the world, which, as we're describing, don't really work that well on the casual end. You can't really have both worlds, unfortunately. No one's ever figured it out, at least.
Yeah.
There was one... Oh, sorry, Sam.
I was going to say, one thing I do like that in the beginning I didn't, is that they're trying to make games a bit shorter. And in the beginning, I hated that just because I came from Dota and I just used 50-minute games. But actually now, to counteract your previous points about people leaving and so on, all games, if it's going to go one way, they get to render at 20 now. I think that's something that I quite like, that, you know, by 20 minutes, you know that the guy is ahead by a lot. So that's actually something that I like that works for both, I think.
It's funny because to me that's the wrong mindset to have, especially in solo queue, prior to sort of mid Diamond 3, you know, because honestly, until players in Diamond know how to close a game with some kind of snowballing, players can mount up 10, 15k gold advantage and not know how to push towers together and end the game. So there's always comeback opportunities just because they're going to take so long to close the game out. And that's why I tend never to give up. when I play solo queue, and actually there's always miracles that happen, which is why I don't want to like FF at 20.
I think if I had to say the one area that League players on all levels are still absurdly bad at, and this is actually one area where Counter-Strike has the edge, is because the way the scoreboard works. In Counter-Strike, you check the scoreboard all the time, right? Except for like players who know what the fuck they're doing, like junglers. A lot of players aren't checking the scoreboard that much in League. Like they're not even actually keeping track of the items the other guy has. And the craziest to me is, mate, you have to go quite a few ranks up in League before people even figure out, like, maybe I shouldn't just only be attacking the Vayne if that's the one with 1 kill and the fucking, Darius has 10 kills. Like, they don't even know, like, who to focus in the team fight. They just do it as if, like, there was no scoreboard and you had to go by, like, well, I don't want a Vayne taking over the team. They just do, like, the noob version of it. So that's one area I will say there's a weird disconnect. Because that's the thing that frustrates me as well, is it's like, why is everyone dumping all their ults on this fucking support player? Like, it's the guy, like, and obviously some broken-ass champion as well. It's like, I think it's this Echo with 19 kills and every item that's going to kill us if we don't kill him now. Like,
yeah. I mean, my point to your thing is just I don't want to play 10 games to win one. It's to make a Thorin metaphor. It's like I don't want to date, this fat waitress just because 1 out of 100 will be an amazing girlfriend. It's just like this is not looking great. I'm out. On to the next one. And I'm Diamond 4 as well. It's not. I know that I can come back maybe if someone throws and so on. But it just becomes, I don't want to play 9 losing games just to check once.
Yeah, but in Diamond 4, it's reasonable because there's like 5 to 10k goal difference. Like, it's not even just the goal difference that means you're probably going to lose this. It's the goal differences happen because the enemy players were laning and playing better than your teammates, and that's probably not going to change. So that's okay. But in sort of gold, like even plat, you'll get comebacks happening basically all the time, especially with some late game team comp. There's some champs that I find are really busted at casuals. One of them would have to be, for example, Soraka, because players who don't know how to focus her are just going to be attacking the ADC forever. And that ADC is just not going to die. And but you're never going to see her in pro play because, look, Faker just picked LeBlanc and then just one shoots at the beginning of every team fight. Great. But I think League is getting a lot better as a game compared to when I decided to end. For the main reason is they stopped changing the game as much, at least from what I've been able to tell. From season 5 to sort of season 8, I guess, it was like champs getting reworked all the time, item structure completely redone, new map. And then every time I was trying to read a patch, like the patch was like a novel for me to try and understand where it was going. Never mind trying to figure out what the new meta was going to be like. It was just even going through so much content every like 6 weeks. That's one of the reasons why I stopped. Oh, and also my main was Talon at the time, and then they reworked him. And one of the things that I enjoyed, the single thing that I enjoyed the most in League playing Talon was dodging those skill shots with the E. Because you just teleport, and then you'd have like Syndra coming up to you and saying, you're low health, I'm just going to stun you. And then you just dodge it and then one shoot her because you're able to go invisible straight away.
Do you not enjoy the parkour element they added? Looks pretty cool. I've never played it, but it looks cool from the outside.
Yeah, it looks cool.
But it's still relatively linear in terms of like his Q just dash forward, and then like the majority of champs has some kind of have CC that is able to counter that, and I like that gameplay less, especially with the parkour. So I stopped almost because of that rework as a diehard Talon main. But then you look at sort of this year, there's been relatively far fewer reworks of champs, and the less the game changes, the more the casual is able to follow what's going on without having to read up on an encyclopedia of League of Legends, 150 characters. So for me, that's why I'm enjoying League right now much more than I have over the past couple of years. And the esports scene that's not as Korean-sided. But I think it's going in the right direction. But I wonder if there will be some kind of league fatigue settling. I know it's like 10 years since the game came out, so there may never be one. But I wonder if might be happening to one of you guys.
What I would say is this: like, first of all, on the topic of what you were saying there, like that's actually one thing about League that I don't like is like basically the game itself can change because they can rework the character, and it's like, what if that was your favorite champion? Like, you can now never play that champion again because like the version that you like. I'll give you the best example. When I played jungle, one of my favorite junglers was Eve. I fucking love that. I would even play that when it's out of the meta because, like, I mean, listen, because I'm from like a Counter-Strike background, it's all about sneaking around and, you know, like getting the perfect flank on someone. Like, basically, the reason I loved it is it's a champion you can win without having like sick mechanics or like insane like knowledge of the pathing. So you can just basically make a lot of clever moves. So the problem is, if you've seen what they reworked her into, now she's like more of an assassin. Now she's just like, her main role is just to fuck you up, basically. Like, they changed everything about it almost. So I actually hate that new. I can't even, like, first of all, I don't really understand how I'm supposed to play it. I've never watched any guides of it. Again, like you, maybe I just go off the old champions I used to play and I hope they're the same and I try to do what I do. So it actually kind of sucks because here's the thing. It's not like I hate the new Eve. I just wish that was a new champion. Have that be called Bill or something and it just has all the new abilities. Why can't I play the old Eve? Like, you know, I thought that was fucking sick. And I know it's the same for a lot of players, like old school Rise players, or I think the classic one's probably fucking Graves, right? Because obviously everyone used to love that shit when it was the ADC and it had that sick ult, whereas now like, they completely changed that champion. It's totally different. In fact, it's not even competitive anymore. So I think that's only one angle that's a bit whack. Is like, I'd rather you just make that a new champion. Why do you have to rework it all? I know why they do it. Again, sadly, this is where the money aspect comes in. They want to make it novel and new, and they want to give you a chance of something OP to do. And obviously, that's actually one of the real problems, right? It's kind of like Counter-Strike where they rework a map. They tend to rework the map that's the most played out, right? Well, what they tend to do, pretty obviously, is they wait till Rise is on like 38% win rate and it just is shit. And then their logic is, well, no one would play that, so they won't mind if we rework it and make it super OP. So again, I get the reasons, they just won't work for me personally. You know, I'm not the ideal candidate for it.
Like old school Swain. I don't think I've ever seen a champ with as low win rate as Swain before, like the rework.
Sure.
It was. I think on Reddit, I'd never seen some kind of Swain post, except for that one Swain main who said, "I can't even play my main champion rank because he's that bad." I fully understand this. This point. It's just a shame that a game that you love so much and you're able to sort of relate with a character because of how much you play that one character, and then suddenly it just disappears and like, well, that's guess I'll just change my playstyle completely now.
Like, to me, that's also something like on the casual side that made the game work still as a fun game, is that because, like, listen, they have the game knowledge, but like skill-wise, I always think the skill ranks in League are pretty fucking accurate, mate. Like, you can tell if you're in the low ranks that, like, this fucking, like, I'll give you an obvious example. Some like super OP champion now, like Kai'Sa, like, well, whoever the fuck's piloting that at silver is going to be fucking awful mechanically. So as a result, it's not going to be a very OP champion. Like, they're not going to do anything up until they get the ult. Whereas, yeah, obviously that would be mad out of control if it was in challenge and you took that into the game. Like, you wouldn't be able to do anything against it. But the good thing about that is, it means that if you're someone like we're describing now who just wants to play your main that you played for a long time, even if you know this is a bad matchup, your logic just goes, I'll work around that. You know, I still know, hopefully I know more about this champ than he knows about his, and that evens the difference, and I can still win. It can still be fun to even try, right? Like, sometimes, I've played a lot of the bot lane roles. I think it's kind of fun when you know you're in a bad matchup, but you also, like, see, like, you can see the little gaps where it's like, I might be able to outplay this motherfucker, though. That's going to be even more satisfying. Whereas if I just have the winning matchup and I just win just by CS and a couple of kills, sometimes that feels like, well, that was supposed to happen, wasn't it? You know, what did I even do there? Was I even good in that game, or was the character good?
I mean, in terms of numbers and so on, I mean, League is still going great.
On the fatigue side, yeah. What do you think about that, Zen?
I mean,
like, do you ever get sick enough that you'll never play it again or quit watching it?
I mean, I don't watch the game. I just watch highlights. I think games are still too boring. But to play, I mean, I can always switch champions, especially since I changed to I'll play anything. You know, for ages I didn't play Leona because it sounded like a dumb champ, and now I just picked it up and I get S+ rating in the first game, even if I don't know what the champ does. So it's just
Leona's an awesome champion. What are you talking about? Because the best thing about Leona
is... But I'm Janna, so that was my...
Yeah, I know what you mean, but that's the point.
Yeah.
Mate, the best thing about when you play Leona is if anyone hasn't played that champion, you can always tell because they're always like, oh, look, he's just gone right into us. We're going to kill him now. It's like, you idiot. That's the whole point of that champion is like, you can't kill me when I go in. Like, I have a million years and all sorts of shit. So, like, it's one of those ones where, like, that's actually probably one of the weirdest things about League. Like I was saying before, like, I would have guessed as an outsider, because I've never played the champion, that the rework of talent looks awesome because when I see him do all the tricks, it looks fucking sick. But so actually, to be fair, sometimes it's really hard to know how hard or easy a champion is if you don't play it. Like, sometimes they just look amazing, and then you find out, oh, it's actually just brain dead champions. Like, I don't know what I was even thinking was sick about that. In terms of the fatigue angle, though, I don't think that will happen. Like, one of the reasons I actually think that games that have had a long tenure, Counter-Strike, StarCraft, because the thing people don't realise about StarCraft is StarCraft isn't actually a dying/dead game. It's just that every other esport got way bigger and it couldn't go up because, let's face it, no casuals want to play a 1v1 game against someone who's fucking honed one strategy to a million. No, it's just shit. And then the pro scene, unfortunately, StarCraft 2, they ruined the pro game by making it so like the fight that could end the game so quickly, etc. That's not StarCraft. StarCraft's supposed to be like semi-like chess. Like in a game like Brood War, like you were saying before at Dota, there's a build-up, and then the one team fight doesn't end the game. It sets up the next team fight and sets the team like, we're in the advantage, we've got the disadvantage, then they play accordingly. So the problem that StarCraft had is it just got overtaken, basically. But even that game, people still play it. They've played it for 10, 20 years. The reason why I think these games endure is because, first of all, fundamentally, on some level, they're good games. Like, yeah, I might not think League's as good as CS, but that's because CS exists, so why do I have to play League, you know? Still if there was no CS, I'd say League's a pretty good game. You know, bearing in mind, most multiplayer games aren't even supposed to last a year. They're just the thing that's tacked onto the game, or they last a couple of years and they fade out. The other thing is, the reason I think they last so long is it's almost like the sunken cost fallacy. When you've played them long enough, you no longer judge them fairly in the same way as you would judge like a new game or a totally new concept of a game. You just think it's just League. So when you're in the mood to play League, you load up League. It's like playing football or playing squash or something. If you get into one of those sports, you don't really think, I think I've had enough of squash, I'm never going to play against it. You want to get better, right? Or you play with your mate who you've always played. And there's another angle that's mad underrated about gamers. You definitely get a community aspect. That's what keeps you playing eventually. Like I actually personally would almost never have played CSGO if people like Vince, the caster, and people like that didn't just ask me when they'd be free, like, oh, you're free later to play? And I'd be like, the point is, I wouldn't have loaded up matchmaking then, or face it. But if there's going to be 4 people I know play, yeah, why the fuck? If there's even going to be 3, yeah, that'll be fun. And even if I have a bad game, there could be a fun angle to that. It could be the community aspect. So I think actually we all keep each other locked into the game that we know. Like in League especially, like you're saying, you were away for years, mate, but you still came back eventually. There's eventually you want to check in and see what's going on. If it gets you hooked again, you come back for a while. Yeah. It's also cool you can kind of dip out. By the way, I even think you can tie that back in earlier to another factor for teams like Fnatic as to why they can be really good and then the same players can be terrible. Unfortunately, in CS, not only do we barely have an off-season, but even worse, because we don't really have an off-season and it's so competitive to stay at the top and the salaries are worth so much, right, you can't really, like, take time off the game. So if you really are, I mean, Fnatic's a good example because some of you guys know the actual really fucked up things that went on behind the scenes with some of the players, like in their lives, etc. That could obviously affect you emotionally. But even worse than that, let's say, like, you're just not feeling the game anymore. You know, you've played, like, Kenny S is a great example. This guy's grinded CS from the day he was like 14 years old or something. So as a result, when he then gets a bit burned out when one of his teams isn't like a world beater and he knows he can't win the tournament and he thinks, you know what, I'll just do half as much practice now and chill with my girlfriend. I can't really blame him. Like, what's he supposed to play for 20 years in a row? Like, fucking hell, he's not a minor, you know. Like eventually, you know, he's still just a human. So the problem is, there's a lot of pros that, put it this way, some of them aren't really slumping. They're just phoning it in. Now, but they're never going to admit that for obvious reasons, because then that fucking check would stop pretty quick. So, sadly, when you know that sometimes does, like, that's one of those things, knowing behind the curtain, as it were, that ruins a bit of the magic. Is like all the fans can be like, oh, what's going on with him? Where's his head at? It's like, yeah, he actually just got a girlfriend and he just hasn't been playing much. Like, that's why the joke is, the only way fans tend to know that is, when they say the number of hours you've played on Steam. So for example, I'll give you a topical example right now that will make the current CS scene a little bit less sexy. So one of the interesting things about EG is that whenever Breezy has a bad game or tournament, they're shit. Well, apparently he had something like 20 hours over 2 weeks on Steam. When you know that, all of a sudden it's not as crazy, is it? Like, it's like, oh, well, there we go. I'm sure before the major, when he was fucking fire, I bet he had like 80 hours per 2 weeks, 100 hours per 2 weeks, That's also one of the reasons, again, that dumbass fans don't know why I'll literally lay into a motherfucker like Zeus with no remorse, even though he's won all those majors, championships. Because when I know this motherfucker has like 2 hours on Steam, then goes into a game and has 6 kills, and Simple has 40 kills and they lose the game, guess what? I've always said this, I'm your reckoning, motherfucker. The game can't punish you. Life can't punish you. I'm the Punisher. It's a quarter ball right there. I'm the Punisher.
I remember this exact match. It was on Mirage. I think it was against Space in the semi-final. Overtime, Zeus.
No, Mouse Spots it was. It was Mouse Spots.
Mouse Spots, and then...
yeah, he had like 6 kills. Yeah, it was when Henry did the classic line. Do you want to know something funny? I don't know if people know this. I won't go into too much detail here, because obviously this could leak out, but I'll keep it safe. All I'll say is this. When Henry did that call, right, what he did was when Zeus got that like double kill with the CZ, and before that had like 4 kills or something, and then he got 6, right at the end of the game. Henry's call obviously was like, he finally does something. Now here's what's hilarious. Because we were in Ukraine at fucking Zeus's home stadium, effectively, Henry actually got like fucking, people were like, I won't say they were bullying him, but like he felt pressured that he had to sort of like back down from that afterwards. Even though I thought in the context of the game, not only was it a great call, it was actually like the only reasonable way to address that scenario. You couldn't just be like, well, Na'Vi, they just weren't good enough as a team. Simple, should have had 55 kills. Like, you couldn't do that, could you? Like, at that point, what can you do except flame the guy? The guy really did have 6 kills or whatever, or 4 kills or something. Like, sooner or later, fans have to get over, like, thinking that we're going to have to be a kid's game. Like, if you ever watch real sports, sometimes they go harder than we do. Like I've noticed in real sports, they have a problem that sometimes affects analysts in CS, which is, so I'll give you a great example. When Pimp was riding Astralis super hard in the summer before they'd actually properly come back, obviously he's going to look like an idiot, isn't he? Because he's predicting like Astralis 2-0 over Team Liquid, and then it's the other way around, right? So the problem he would have is when he goes back to the desk, what he really should do is say, like, Astralis was bad in these areas, but well played the Team Liquid grid. The problem is, because he himself's been riding hard for him, he's just going to go into Astralis at that point. He's actually going to punish them for disappointing him, essentially. So, unfortunately, like, people don't realise, you do, in a way, it's not that you have to be brutal, but you have to criticise players who play shit. You just have to. There's no point us playing the game if we're not going to do that. Everyone can't be good. And everyone patently is not good. We can all see that with our eyes,
Oh, Jesus.
Let's do one more topic. Let me think. What would be a good one? Let me think.
Can I just say one
jump in.
thing relating to a point you'd said earlier? So a lot of contrast. So in my case, in terms of why I stopped for a little bit League of Legends and why I stopped StarCraft for a little bit. StarCraft being my first esport game that I've played. There's StarCraft 2, actually. I've never played the original.
Sure, yeah, makes sense.
And so I reached Master, and I stayed there for quite a few months. And I remember, ended up against Grandmasters in solo queue. And
did you ever play any famous players?
No, not really. Kind of. I played. Do you know? He's now an Overwatch pro, Boombox.
Yeah, of course.
We went to university together.
I didn't know he actually played StarCraft 2. Fair enough.
Yeah, he was challenger for a long time. Protoss. Played with him. I really enjoyed that game. The one thing that made me stop was the third Protoss expansion when something small. They decided to change the number of workers at the beginning of the match. And what happened was struts that I've practiced mechanically for years.
The timers are all off, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, every single time. I had no idea what I was doing. It's like completely playing Warcraft 3 instead to me. And I didn't even want to learn when that happening. So I think what Blizzard said was competitively, because you started off with like 5 workers and then you had to make those workers. And the first 2 minutes had nothing much happening other than like a drone scout and then maybe like a probe trying to block an expansion in the natural. Then that was too boring for the spectator. So we had to cut that to now just 30 seconds waiting time rather than 2. And I thought, come on, have you ever seen League? There's like nothing happening for the first 20 minutes. But anyway, they decided to do that. And players going from their timings that had been the same in Brood War and in Heart of the Swarm now had a completely different game in the 3rd expansion. And I didn't want to take part of that, so that's why I quit. In the same way, League of Legends just kept changing all the time in ways that was almost absurd from one patch to the next.
I mean, the jungle and stuff, of course.
So, like, games changing too much too quickly were, I think, was like for me a big problem. And
if you notice, what you're nailing there is exactly, this is why actually it's such a weird scenario, because I've no doubt most of the players in CS League are like a churn of newer players, and some players dip out and some players come in. But the point is, in the old days, you'd cater to the people who are the hardcore fans, right? The ones who want to play all the time, like us, essentially, like we're saying. And the problem is, what you're outlining here is actually the reason why I would keep playing a game like squash, but I wouldn't play squash if they changed the rules every month. Because if I've spent years trying to learn like the correct shot to do and the form, etc., if you completely change the racket, it's like, oh, fucking hell, like now I don't get the satisfaction. Now, in fact, I feel like you stole something from me because I used to be able to do all this cool shit. Now I can't do it.
Yeah.
I even got an angle on that as well, which is, unfortunately, that is the reason I never liked well, there's a lot of reasons I didn't like StarCraft 2, but one fundamental reason is because, like, listen, without sparking a fucking holy war of all the different people who play all the different races in the game arguing about stuff, just inherently from a design principle, the problem with the way they made Protoss in StarCraft 2 breaks StarCraft 2. And so the problem it has in that game is Protoss can only be too overpowered, or it has to have like one matchup that's shit. There's the only 2 scenarios that can exist, and it's because it's so overpowered in terms of the tech that you have to make it so that it's on a knife edge, so that way the really amazing player can just get through and do it and win the game, but the absolute shit player doesn't take over all the ladder and just every grandmaster, like, I mean, every, like, let's say, like, masters player, maybe diamond, plat. Let's say every plat player isn't Protoss, because obviously if you have a low level, people aren't going to be able to execute stuff. So the problem with that is, as you're saying here, unlike some of the other races, where you can be reactive, or you can be the guy setting the game plan, or on Terran, it's very much about like deciding the tech path you're going to go. For Protoss, it really is about like, it's like you're on the rails. You know, like, right, I have to get this done at exactly this time. I have to get this at exactly this time. I have to correctly respond like this. If I do, I'll probably win the game. If I fuck up any little bit of that, the whole game goes to shit. So I can see what you mean. If they change all the timings of the builds and they change like some of the aspects, you're going to feel like, what was I perfecting? Like, now I have to start all over again. Meanwhile, maybe the guy who plays Terran, half his shit still works from the beginning of Wings of Liberty, you know?
Yeah, one particular example that I had was, so I was a Zerg player, very much full-on Zerg, and all my timing. So the thing with Zerg is it's a very reactive race. You can't just go all in with a bunch of Zerglings because that's never going to work. What you tend to do is you sort of try to see what they're making, and then you play really greedy until you realize they're a threat, and then that's when you start making a bunch of units to defend yourself. If I have my scouting timings wrong, if I have my tech timings off, if I'm not able to figure out what time they're going to all-in me, because I don't know my own timings, never mind trying to figure out the timing of the Protoss all-in that's going to come in at me. Now, in Heart of the Swarm, I knew, okay, the Immortal all-in from the Protoss is going to come at 7 minutes and a half. If that's changed because of the change, then I have the entire game to relearn, and I didn't want to do that. So, yeah, it was rough, because I think until CSGO post 2016 when Brazil started taking over. StarCraft was my favorite esport by far because the games were pretty exciting throughout and fairly quick. It's just a shame that Blizzard made such a drastic change in the third expansion. So that's all I wanted to say.
Fair enough.
On that topic.
But, for last topic, can I ask you a question? So basically, now that on League that Forgiven is coming back, what's your best guess at what will be his level? And if it's not, one of the top 1 or 2, what do you think will be the thing that he could improve or that keep them from being number 1?
I know you said you're not super duper watching League, etc. But do you ever watch any of my shows I do in League?
Yeah, just Listen Logo just dropped half an hour before the call.
Yeah, so fair enough. So you'll know, because if you notice, one of the things I do actually intentionally on those shows is, this is what a lot of fans don't get, is with how wide the world is in League of Legends and how many regions play and how much turnover of players there are, if you are just constantly talking about new players and new things, and there's no frame of reference, no one can really know, what does he really think about things? So what I do is I have certain players that I seem to always relate everything to, precisely because they become a reference point. People will understand. As soon as I say, unlike a player like Reckless, as soon as I even say Reckless, they know where it's going, right? They know the angle. It kind of becomes a shorthand, so we don't have to explain the same thing 700 times. Now, sadly, people who are literally mentally ill think that means I'm the one who's just obsessed with Reckless and I'm sat there with his picture on my wall throwing fucking knives at it or something I'm not. Again, it's just literally it's a very useful tool to explain stuff. So as a result, obviously, I've talked about Forgiven a lot on those shows. Mm-hmm. The problem is, though, and this has always been my biggest frustration in League of Legends, almost everyone who's a pro or an analyst or a former pro or a big name streamer in League, their first game in terms of trying to be in esports was League, and they didn't follow the other games. Even when they say, for example, you'll hear motherfuckers like Doublelift say I like CSGO, I watch the Team Liquid team, and they'll play a game. First of all, he'll be dog shit when he plays, and then secondly, his version of watching the game is he's like a cat watching a fucking firework. He knows something's happening. He has no clue what it is though. It's such an alien game to him. So the problem is you can't relate any examples that aren't from that game. They just start tuning out. What's he talking about? It's a different game, isn't it? So what people don't get, Zen, is this. I if you notice, one of the themes I often brag about is I nail so many of these stupid ass analysts because I always am able to call the great player who looks like he's washed up will come back. And they're always like, no, he won't. He doesn't understand the game and the meta, and he hasn't adapted. And, his time's over. His time was a few years ago. Because what they don't understand is what we understand from Counter-Strike, which is people can have a bad year, but if they're truly great players, they can get good again. Maybe they might not be the absolute best, but even then, there's a tier of players that can become the best again. And they are the players I call the prodigies. They are the Kenny S. I'll give you an example. Any newer fan who thinks Kenny S will never be a really good player again, first of all, he's pretty good now. And secondly, you give him the right team and maybe in a year from now, he could literally be a top 5 player of the world again. Because what happens is when you're at that level of absurd, almost innate ability. These guys almost from the day they started the game were ridiculously good. They didn't have to learn from an IGL and level up. They did their knowledge, but the game stuff, they're like one of those people in football like Messi, where you see a video of them as a little kid and they're doing all the shit they do now, going around every player and doing step overs and stuff. There's nobody really taught that guy that. There's something innate in those players. Well, I will tell you with no shadow of a doubt, Forgiven is one of the few players who is like that in League of Legends. So I actually personally think, in terms of his mechanics and stuff, he will come back at a solid 80 or 85% of what he was before. Now, his problem's obviously going to be, yes, the game's changed a bit and how the roles work, but luckily, another thing people don't understand about this guy, he has a ridiculous work ethic and he hates to lose.
Yeah.
He hates to lose, even if he wins the game, but doesn't feel like he did all things correctly. So you combine those two factors, and I'm going to go ahead and say, I think by the end of the first split, he will already be a top 3 player at the AD carry position. I don't care who's in the... And by the way, this is actually the most stacked split maybe ever for AD carry. If you look at the players we've got now, it's a really stacked one. So I'm really excited to see it because I know, again, the League of Legends fans are going, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I've already called it about 500 times on Froggen. So I was like, how many times do they have to tell me these players are going to fail? What's funny is, the weird thing about League is most of the experts, because there's an enormous burden of knowledge, there's so many things you can know about League. I make it sound like I know nothing and they know everything. That I do that just to offset stupid fans and make it so it's a non-starter as an argument, thinking I know more. But I tell you what, in certain aspects of the league, I know way more than most of the analysts. The point is, some of them are a genius at macro. One of them's a genius in the draft. Some of them were a genius when they played. When you actually ask them to evaluate things, because think about it, right? If you're evaluating a player in the sense that I'm talking about now, you're not really talking about what he does in the game. You're talking about who he is as a person, what drives him, like what would the factors that brought him to the top in the first place be, and could they be replicated, or could some new ones occur? And actually, like I have to say, being an older person, being someone who's been around a lot longer, those are areas I've sort of been able to carve a little niche out that those guys aren't even thinking about. Like if you notice, some of the top teams in League of Legends will sign some like super borderline rookie where you're like, holy shit, you're like the best team. Why are you taking a chance on this guy? Like, why not just get the proven player? And it's because they don't know what they're doing. They just see that right now in solo queue, he looks sick. Look, his win rate's 85%. Look, when he was on this other team, he was killing us when he was playing Elise. It's like, these are the dumbest reasons to recruit a guy to your team. Like, what you really want to recruit, if you notice, this is one of the reasons I actually was vaguely interested in coaching once upon a time. Because what I would have tried to do is have players who could survive the meta going against them. If you have that rookie kid who's only good this year, and we've only ever seen him play this year, God knows what happens to him next year. If he was, for example, how many NA junglers have they produced now that were mechanical junglers that ganked a lot? And then when it went to the Cinderhawk meta, they literally roll over, and the Xmithies and the other guys in the world are just destroying them. They don't even have a chance against them because their skill set couldn't endure. Whereas the players I kind of fuck with, they might not always be the best. So what's funny is, like, someone like Froggen's basically never been bad. People just rag on me when he's like the 5th best player in the role, you know. What they don't know is I'll take the beating when he's the 5th best, because when the right meta comes around in a year from now, he might be the 2nd best, and then they have to eat crow because they said he could never do it again. Whereas all I said was he's not the best at the moment. So, like, that's one of those weird angles where I know it might sound weird, like it might sound, what's that based on? I actually think it's based on more than the people who are judging league players at the moment. I think they're the ones using very, very fleeting, like, metrics that don't really, like, they don't even understand themselves. Whereas, like, everything I know about Forgiven tells me this guy is not coming back to collect a check. He is not coming back to fuck around. Yeah. He's only coming back, no joke, because deep down he thinks he will be the best. And there's another thing. When I know a player really believes that, that is worth its weight in gold. Because I can tell you, if you notice, I often say this, the 2 preoccupations of my career, it started with I wanted to watch the best players, because obviously that's why you start esports, right? I want to see who's the best. But then my second obsession is the person who has the skills to be the best, but they can't make it. So in the past Device, in the past Elige, these players that seem like the choker, right? Because what you're really discovering then is it's not about skill. It's like, what is it in the mind of the champion that makes him the champion and makes the other guy always come runner-up? And what you find is some of the people who are the champions, their mind is just on a totally other level. So it's the same. It's the reason why back in the day, I used to much more heavily ride with Froggen. I don't ride with him as much now. I think he's a brilliant player still, because I actually know to some degree he nails it in. He does it in terms of individually. He keeps his game on point. He does the best he can. But he doesn't really think these teammates he's getting into teams with are the best players. He doesn't even care. He just wants a big check and to play a league and be a mid laner, and I'll just do my shit and you do yours. Whereas back in the day, this is not an exaggeration. People think I say this as like a joke. He was the only player in the world, when Faker was at their peak, really thought he would beat Faker if he played him. He was the only one. No. Everyone else, before they even got to the tournament to play Faker, they'd all seen him in the highlights and they were like, oh shit, they were like shit scared, you know. They were waiting for him to style on him. Froggen really thinks, or he did back then, that he would just do to Faker what he does to everyone else. He'd play like a lane champ, he'd fucking farm, Faker would be trying to initiate on him, he's like ungankable. Like, he really believed that. So when you know someone thinks that, and you know they've got the skills and the work ethic, you're not even gambling when you say that guy's going to make it, you know. It's almost certain.
Yeah. I obviously agree with all that, especially since we mentioned the other games. Forgiven is the one guy that has been top of the ladder in CSGO and all the other games. So that's he's
a real natural talent at games, but it's not just league.
So he could learn anything. My one concern is his previous reputation of not wanting to learn Kalista, and now there's so many Kalistas, and even at top level in the world stage, we were seeing like in the semifinals, we couldn't pick this because our AD carry can play whatever.
Sure.
And if he doesn't want to learn mages, if he doesn't want to learn Senna because it's like so OP that they will nerf her for sure, but he might not want to learn her because of that. Same argument as Kaisa, as Kalista at the time. So I think that's the one thing that worries me a bit. I'm not worried about the usual stuff like he's toxic or old.
Have any of you have both of you watched Game of Thrones?
Yep.
I don't. But
did you watch it all to the end?
No.
Yes.
When did you stop watching Zen?
First season.
Oh, right. Do you actually care if I give you a spoiler?
No.
Right, basically, one of the characters that I always compare Forgiven to, and not just because he vaguely looks like him, is the character Stannis Baratheon, but specifically the version in the show, not in the books. Because in the show, what Stannis Baratheon represents, basically, is like the harsh rule of, like, legal good, if you want to use, like, a Dungeons & Dragons, like, alignment. Like, the concept is, like, he will follow the law, and he is good. But if anything happens, like if you break the law and like his right-hand man, literally, he cuts his hand off because even though he was smuggling for him, that is breaking the law. And since he upholds the rules of the realm, even though you did it for me, I don't have to punish you. The fact that you get fed into that temptation, that's your fault. Sorry, I'm actually being fair by doing that, right? Forgiven is like that in the sense that like, he never was purely toxic. He's never just raging. He is actually raging in a way that he thinks is helping, and he is trying to actually correct a teammate. His problem is he's just incredibly like harsh but fair. And then the key reason I made the show example is because in the show they actually have the stupidest like change to the character from the book imaginable, which is they essentially have Stannis Baratheon gets into a scenario where his forces are all depleted. He's stuck in the middle of like Winterfell, and if he goes and marches into this battle, he's definitely going to lose. But the point is, the character they'd established would still do it, because in theory, that's the dutiful thing to do. That's the correct thing. You know, you've led these men all this way. Loads of them have died. They've given their lives. It's time for you to give your life. Like, you have to just go there, and with honour, you lose. Now, a modern-day person, a random pleb in a game will think, well, fuck honour, I just want to win. A random pleb will think, fuck the best team, give me the most money. You don't get many people in the modern day who have that kind of like, it's almost like the knights of old, you know, like this weird code of honor that to them becomes almost mystical and they like feel compelled to maintain. Well, what's mad about Forgiven is, not only does he have that in terms of how he plays the game, but he literally does that with the champions. So this is not a joke. There are some champions he actually feels are beneath him to win on, even if it is in the superior matchup and will win.
Yeah.
And so even though this guy's playing at a pro level, he's basically handicapping himself because he just thinks like here's the problem with it is when I describe it like that, loads of fans will be out when they'll hear that and they'll be like, fucking hell, I hate this guy. I love it because it's actually a thing I found out recently. I've never followed fighting games. And there's a guy who's a legendary fighting game guy who I was aware of, but I never watched the game. It's that guy called Daigo Umara from Japan, right? And this is basically, if you've never followed any of those games, what makes this guy amazing. It's not that he was a champion and he won loads of times, he kept coming back for 10, 15 years. What actually makes him amazing, because he wrote an entire like biography where he explains his philosophy, is when he tries to become the best, he tries to become the real best. As in, say you're amazing on a character and at like certain move combos, he tries to beat you into that. Yeah. He doesn't do like the UFC where you don't want to get beat up, so you take away the guy's strength and you win on points and you hold him down. He basically is the equivalent of like if I was a UFC fighter fighting a guy who's like a knockout artist, and I'd just sit in the pocket and let him swing at me all day long, and I'm like, you know what? I'm actually a wrestler, but I'm going to beat you at boxing. Like, he has that kind of a fucked up. So when you hear that though, again, if you're like a purist for games, that's like porn. That's like you just instantly, you're just hooked. So when you know Forgiven also has that, put it this way, it's the reason why I don't lose my shit that he makes such stupid decisions in terms of teams, and then he just quits for a split, and then he he doesn't live up to his potential to win the league. Meanwhile, Reckless just cruises by on on the back of a stretch limousine that's been driven by Expecki and Soares, and everyone's like, oh, brilliant AD carry, genius, fucking brilliant merger. Like, I can handle that, because here's the thing. One of them did it with honour, and one of them didn't. One of them just was willing to be carried. And at the end of the day, I don't actually think on team games that team accomplishments are actually that meaningful. In my opinion, the best way to describe it is the brilliant defensive player in the NFL called Ray Lewis used to say when he was giving his speeches to his players, he wouldn't say, we're going to win this game. What he would say is like, let's play this game the right way. Let's play this game hard. And the logic was, it ain't about whether you win or lose. It's about how you play. And that's not in like the little kid way of like, you just play the game. It's like, as in, there has to be a reason you play. And winning actually, in my opinion, should just be a byproduct of excellence. It's not just the goal. Like, I don't want to win cheap. I don't want to win because, like, that's why I actually, one thing, I'll give you a Counter-Strike example I can quickly tie it into. The one area I actually do fuck with Nico's massive ego in is when he said, I'm never going to play with this org. I think it's shit. I don't think it's got any skill. Because if you know Nico with a fucking AK, he is unreal. He's just a master of that gun. So his logic was like the Dago one. It's like, you know what? I'm going to beat you with your Kriegs and your Orgs with my AK. It's going to be harder, but then when I win, I'll be doubly winning, won't I? Because I'll win and I did it with honor. Like, I know it's weird, but I really relate to that. I love it. I think it's sick.
Well, I mean, I understand. I also think it's, there's some satisfaction to it. I just think that in this day and age where there's 10 Callistas instead of one, I can easily see, what Syndra is a damn champion. Let me not learn it. And it's like, well, you're now 20% worse because you have to ban out.
Yeah, that will be a very interesting. I'm with you on that one. I think that will be pretty interesting. Because, by the way, like, if you also know the talent level this guy has, it's laughable to think he couldn't have played any of these champions.
Of course, he would be the best Callista in the world. Like
he would have. Sadly, he would have actually been a very, very good player. If he'd have like forced himself to play in combat, he would have definitely been very good. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Dane Cuskley, Dean Tanglis, Chi Mao, JDubs, Mohammed, Alabdul, Razzaq, NateDOhDoubleG, Patrick Ribeiro, Tobias Bernasconi, Who the Fuck is Viathan, and special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers for upcoming content that I've got? Do you want to take part in a discussion with me? Well, if you would like any of these perks or to support my work, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.